What's up guys, it's Talon. Today we're going to be giving you a full mid lane guide. We're going to talk about everything you need to know about mid lane from the start of the game, how champions work, to the early to mid to late game, explaining everything from a rank 5 sovereign autofill player who knows how to play all the roles. So if you're interested in future guides, I already have a jungle guide on my YouTube channel and I do plan on making guides for all of the roles, so make sure you like and subscribe for that. And let's get right into the video. And for this video, guys, I'm just going to be having some gameplay on in the background as I give you guys these tips. If you want more specific examples of my actual gameplay showing you guys me doing these specific things, I have a lot of videos on my channel that showcase these things, as well as future videos that I'll also showcase these similar things in. But for this video, we're going to talk over gameplay and just give you guys the tips verbally. The first thing we're going to talk about is champion pool. And so there are kind of 4 types of champions that are often played in mid lane. You have your assassins, you have your mages, you have the AD lane bully type of champions, and you have your supportive / tank champions. So examples of mages are champions like Ziggs, Syndra, Orianna. These champions are often very safe in the early game. They just have distance, you know, they have their range, and then they're playing a lot more for that late game, really scaling up, being very strong in the late game. Then you got your assassins. These champions typically have a bit of a weaker early game, but they also scale up quite nicely, and they're really able to use their roaming power and their one-shot potential to really carry games, especially in the late game. Then you have your lane bullies. These are champs like Akshan, like Lucian, like Jace. These champions are really able to dominate the early game, and that early game potential allows them to not only solo kill in their lanes, but then also allows them to roam because of the lane priority that they're able to get. And lastly, you have your supportive and your tanky type of champions, the Gallios, the Malphites, the champions, the Twisted Fate, really looking to help your team, just kind of play for your team and do whatever you can to help your team. So those are the different types of champions. Whatever type of player you are, it's fine to play that type of, role and that type of champion. Honestly, whatever works best for you is what's best. There's different play styles and different ways that you play each of these champions, and we'll kind of explain that as we go through the rest of this guide. Alright guys, so now we're going to talk about the lane phase. So there are a couple of different types of lanes that you're going to play in. You're going to have melee versus melee matchups. You're going to have range versus range matchups. You're going to have range versus melee matchups, and then melee versus range. So starting off with melee versus melee matchups, what's really important in these matchups is having the priority for level 2. The first person to get level 2 is often going to be the one winning the lane, and that's typically going to be the 4th minion of the first minion wave that will allow you to get level 2. Playing around this level 2 advantage is extremely important because that gives you an extra ability and allows you to trade really effectively with the enemy as that melee champion. Because you're both melee, you're not as worried about getting poked out in the early lane, and you're usually more worried about getting that lane priority, getting those early level advantages, and winning those trades effectively. Comparing that to range versus range, this is much more about actual poke in the lane. Poking your enemy when they go for last hits, making sure you're CSing effectively, playing a little bit more safer, waiting for them to stand still, use their abilities to make them stand still so that you can use your abilities, things like that. So that's kind of a bit of a difference between range versus melee. Now, as the melee champion into a ranged matchup, you're trying to play quite safe in the early game. Again, you're playing around those levels, but typically you're going to have to give up that level 2 advantage early, and you're going to give up early lane priority. So the way that you need to play that type of a matchup is a lot more safe until you get to your level 3, your level 5 power spikes, playing more around your jungle and stuff like that. And then as the range champion into the melee champion, you want to take advantage of any time that any of your minions are low, because you know that the melee champion is going to want to walk up to that. When they walk up to that, that's your time to start poking on them, autoing them, using your abilities on them, these types of things. You're typically going to want to build up your wave and then allow your wave to go under the turret once you have a big enough wave to crash it under the tower. Use that time that the enemy ranged mid laner is now stuck under their tower clearing that wave to get a recall off, to get the item advantage, and then use that item advantage to further snowball your lead. Those are some of the different ways that you want to play the different lane phases. Now let's get into the next part of the video. So now moving on to positioning and wave management in the mid lane. In the early lane phase, it's important to stand on the side closer to where your jungler is, or the side of the lane that is opposite of where the enemy jungler is. So if you have knowledge that the enemy jungler is on the top side of the map, then you want to be closer to the bottom side or the right side of the mid lane. Now, if your jungler is also on the top side and you know that he's coming towards a gank, well, then you're going to want to still hover on that left side towards the top side so that your jungler can easily gank. Using this and baiting the enemy into these easy ganks, as well as positioning away from enemy junglers so that you can avoid ganks, is an extremely important part of understanding mid lane. Okay, so now understanding wave management in the mid lane. So it's very important that you don't just simply roam without having first pushed your wave if the wave is being contested by the enemy, or if there's any chance of them pushing that wave and such. The reason that you need to push your wave before roaming in most scenarios is because if you don't do this, then you're going to lose a lot, whether it's the enemy pushing the wave and taking many turret plates, or it's you missing out on the gold because your minions get killed by their minions. Things like this will allow you to lose a lot and not actually gain much from your roam. Whereas say that you push the wave before you roam, well then that wave will now die under the enemy turret, meaning that the enemy mid laner has to either go there or they lose about 200 gold from a wave. And if they do go there, then you have the first roam and you're not going to be contested on your roam, allowing you to create odd man fights that will be much easier to win. Now, on the other side of things, if you are winning your lane quite hard and you want to continue to stay in lane in order to further bully your lane opponent and play for the killing the turret, in these scenarios, you want to keep the wave closer to your side of the map. That way, whenever the enemy walk up, since you're at an advantage, you can punish their last hits very aggressively, easily win those trades, and then use that advantage to now push the wave once you have the enemy mid laner low and either take the turret, kill the mid laner, or then roam after pushing your turret. Alright guys, so as we spoke about, roaming is really important to do after pushing your lane, but there's another important thing about roaming that many people don't realize, and that's roaming with your jungler's pathing. So when your jungler is on, say, the bottom side of the map, he has 2 camps left to clear, you know that after he clears those 2 camps, he's either going to look for a gank or recall. And this is going to be the best time for you to look for a possible gank on bot lane with him. Say that you know he has 2 camps up, your wave is just coming, you decide, okay, he's going to clear those camps as I'm clearing this wave. After this wave, I'm going to ping my jungler, hey, let's go attack bot lane, and we're going to try to go bot lane. Since he's on bot lane, I can go towards bot lane after pushing my wave, and then we can have a 4-on-2 instead of a 3-on-2 by roaming by yourself. So one thing a lot of people don't do, once again, is roam with their jungler. They just look for roams wherever they feel like they can get kills. But if you're able to play with your jungler on these roams and plan around your jungler's pathing, it makes it infinitely more likely that these ganks don't work out, or that rather that these ganks do work out, and that the enemy can't counter gank you or anything like that. Alright guys, so the next topic is going to be sidelining and how to increase your gold as a mid laner. So oftentimes after the 5-minute mark, once the first objective is taken, whether that's the dragon or the herald, then you are going to now start sidelining. Oftentimes your bot lane duo will both come up and decide to take over the mid lane. And when that happens, you're going to need to assign yourself to a side lane in order to continue to get a lot of gold without taking away from your bot lane being in the mid lane. Now, of course, this doesn't always happen, and sometimes your bot lane is going to stay bot lane, and in those scenarios, you're just going to stay mid lane. But when you do want to side lane, and how you want to side lane is extremely important. So oftentimes, unlike a split pushing Baron laner, you want to side lane on the same side of the objective. So say that a dragon is coming up in 45 seconds on the bottom side of the map. Well, then you're going to want to be towards the bottom side most of the time, because oftentimes your top laner is going to be your split pushing champion, and then you're going to be that champion who's going to the side lane just to get gold. So it's important, again, to understand the purpose of your side laning. Sometimes the purpose of your side laning is to take a turret. Say that I am Ziggs, I see 4 people top side, and I know the only person that could possibly be bot side is someone who's not a threat to killing me. In this scenario, my goal is going to be to take a turret because there's no one to defend me, and I know getting that turret's very easy. Now say we're in a different scenario, the bot lane wave is stacking and getting really big and really close to my tower. In this scenario, my goal is just to get gold and prevent my tower from dying. So I'm not going to go up and continue to push further after clearing this wave. I'm simply going to clear that wave, make sure that I'm able to get proper amounts of damage onto it so that I clear the wave, get all the gold from it, and then after that, I'm just going to go back towards mid lane or hover, help my team, and do other things. So understanding your purpose with your roam and with your side laning is very important. Additionally, it's important to understand that you can die on side lane, and that's okay. There are scenarios where it's perfectly fine to die on side lane in order to get gold. Some of these scenarios include times where you see, say, 3 people top side and you want to split push bot. You know that there's maybe only 2 possible people who could attack you, and it's very unlikely that they both come, and even if only one of them come, you're going to be fine. In a scenario like this, if there's no objective spawning soon, it's perfectly okay to be a bit greedy for some gold on the side lane, because the risk versus reward is quite nice. All that you really risk losing is dying and giving them 300 gold. There's no objective that they're going to get afterwards, and you're pushing the wave, so they're not going to be able to use any wave to kill your tower. Now the possible reward is getting more gold, getting a turret, getting their camps, things like this. Additionally, it's important to understand when it is good to side lane and when it's not. So you can side lane oftentimes if there's nothing that you're really going to lose. But say that your team is grouping mid lane and they're posturing for some type of dumb fight that you don't agree with. if there's an objective that's going to spawn really soon, you're going to have to participate in that fight, because if your team loses it, they're going to also lose the objective. But if your team's doing that same dumb posture for a fight, and you aren't worried about losing anything because there's no objective up and the waves aren't pushed deep enough to take your inhibitor towers or anything, well then in a scenario like that, you stick to the side lane, ping your teammates off of the fight, and if they go, that's okay, because you're still going to be getting gold on a different part of the map. Alright guys, so now let's talk about late game objective setups as a mid laner. So in the, again, mid game, that side laning is going to be extremely important for you. But once you get to these later stages of the game, oftentimes you're going to be wanting to really fight over that mid priority. So when these big objectives are coming up, say a third dragon where it's soul on the table, say the elder dragon, right, or a baron, and these types of things, the best ways to set up for these objectives is to be the first one on the mid wave, pushing that mid wave before anyone else can get to it. That then allows your mid wave to push deeper into their mid lane, and then gives you access to the river first, allowing you to place vision, to sweep out for any of the enemy vision, to have control over that bush so that the enemy has to come into you rather than you having to go into them. Now, of course, make sure you're safe on this side lane. Don't just walk up on the mid wave or on the side lane, you know, wave for free. Obviously, you have to be aware of the enemy's positioning in order to do this, or have your teammates with you. But it's extremely important to understand that lane priority is king in the late game, because this allows you to get the first move onto objectives, have, you know, that easy vision on stuff, everything like that. Additionally, setting up for objectives once again about 30 seconds before they're going to spawn, sometimes even longer, is very important. Don't waste your ultimates, don't waste your flashes, these types of things. If the death that you will cause is not as long as the death timer before the objective. So what I mean by that, say that the death timer is 45 seconds for killing someone. Then you don't want to kill them 55 seconds before Elder Dragon spawns, because they're going to respawn and now you're going to lose your ultimate or your flash to kill them, and that's not going to be worth it. However, say there's 25 seconds left on the objective until it spawns, and then the death timer is 45 seconds. In this scenario, it's going to be perfectly awesome to kill someone by wasting your ultimate or wasting your flash for them. So again, to reiterate, objective setups, lane priority in order to get that early vision, making sure that you're aware of the objective timer and setting up for it a bit before it spawns, and making sure that you don't waste your ultimates and your flashes unless the death timer is higher than the amount of time left until the objective spawns. Alright, so earlier in the video we spoke about the rules of the types of champions in the early game, and now I'm going to speak about those same rules in team fights and later parts of the game. So for assassins to start off, they often want to be on a side lane late game, because this allows them to have potential to one-shot the enemy. Oftentimes they're going to be looking to side lane on the same side of the objective, so they're still able to get to the objective quickly, because they're not typically going to threaten a tower on the opposite side of the map. Additionally, setting up for team fights with these assassins is extremely important. Looking for flank angles by using the sweeping lens to scan out vision and then find a good bush or a good flank angle to kind of camp in for a while you wait for the fight to unfold. Assassins are not going to initiate the fight. They're going to allow their engaged champs or their teammates to go in first, and then they're going to wait for the enemy carry who they're looking to target to waste their defensive spells. Say there's a Xayah, really fed Xayah on the enemy team with a Yuumi on them. Well, then you're going to wait for that possible Yuumi ult to come out, that possible Xayah ult, maybe the flash, the exhaust. You're going to wait for as many of these things as you can until you believe that enough have been wasted that will allow you to then go in and one-shot this carry. Patience is the main thing that assassins need in the late game, because they have enough burst damage to literally one-shot someone in a second at this point in the game. So even if the fight does not look good initially, you need to have that patience, keeping track of the enemy spells, making sure you know exactly what you can and can't kill, who you can and can't kill, and who you should target for the fight to become a win. Now for lane bullies, guys, and these are my favorite champions to play, but lane bullies get really hard to play in the later parts of the game because they often fall off in terms of scaling quite drastically. Now, the benefit of playing a lane bully is that you're often going to have a big gold lead. Typically, lane bullies are probably going to be in the late parts of the game on 4 or 5 items much quicker than the enemy mages, who are probably stuck on about 3 items due to their weaker early game. So you're going to use this item advantage to take fights on the weaker opponents through side lanes and finding those 1v1 opportunities to try to get picks on the enemy before the objective. Now, if you're not able to do that, it's okay, because again, you're still going to have that lead from bullying the lane, and you're going to just look to play basic front to back fights, targeting people who you know you can kill, waiting for these certain dangerous spells to come out, and then going in. So again, a lot of these lane bullies, Jace, Akshan, Lucian, they're all a bit squishy but high burst damage champions, so they're going to be waiting for enemy dangerous spells to come out, say a Zed ultimate, right, a Lissandra ultimate, and like an engage in these types of things that you know can kill you. As soon as you see these things gone, you can go forward, use the gold lead that you gathered in the early game to burst down an enemy carry and then really carry the fight from there in a more front to back fashion, as opposed to an assassin who's looking much more for flank angles much more commonly. Okay, so now we have mages, guys. And as we all know, mages, they're typically a bit weaker in the early game, but their strength is the late game. Now, typically you're trying to play around a certain item power spike. Oftentimes that's going to be a third item death cap that you're really looking for, or say a fourth item crown that's really going to help you not die in these fights, right? These types of item power spikes are what you're playing for in the late game. So say you're around the 14-15 minute mark and you're 1,000 gold away from death cap, well then you need to make sure you're finding as much side lane gold as possible before this Elder Dragon comes at 18 minutes so that we have our power spike. Then once we get into those team fights, oftentimes mages play super front to back. They're just sitting around using their spells, poking people, making sure they're not putting themselves too far up, but also walking far enough forward that they can end up obviously dealing as much damage as possible. The late game team fights are where these types of champions really shine. Additionally, these champs are very good at stalling games due to their really effective wave clear once they're on 3-4 items. You're going to see even in this game that we're showing in the example currently, as Ziggs, as this late game mage, I'm able to stall out the game super effectively, clear the waves very often, and get us through a large part of the game so we have a chance at winning in the late game. This is how oftentimes mages are able to scale up, and then again, once they hit that 3, 4, 5 item mark, they're just straight up one-shotting people with an entire spell rotation, which obviously allows you to win fights very straightforward and very easily. And now lastly, we have, as we spoke about earlier, the supportive type of champions. Now these champions are playing unselfishly and really looking for how they can help the team. That means that maybe they're going to hover a teammate on side lane instead of going for themselves and going for their own gold so that their teammate can be, stronger and be able to carry. For example, say I'm a Galio and I push out the mid wave. Well, now that that mid wave is cleared, instead of maybe looking for more gold or looking for a fight, if I see my, ADC on a side lane by himself, well then I'm going to hover so that I can make sure I can look for a Galio ult. Or, if I'm Twisted Fate, I'm going to use my global ultimate to make sure that I can push out the wave in side lane, because that's going to help my team get the wave pushed out. But instead of looking for turrets and looking to necessarily get myself super far ahead, I'm oftentimes going to be looking more after I push that wave to again look for a possible TP to help my team out. Now once I'm in the team fights, I'm going to use my CC as a supportive champion to try to zone and kill enemy carry or prevent my teammates from dying. So say I have a really fed Zeri on my team and I know that they have a Zed. I'm going to try to have my TF gold card out and make sure that I use my gold card on him as soon as he goes on my teammate so that he gets stunned and my teammate is not at risk of dying. Now I can also use my CC to target the enemy carry, as would any, strong champion. And so if I see any carry that I know really needs to be CC'd and shut down, then I'm obviously also going to use my CC in order to shut them down as well. Alright guys, so now I want to talk about the difference between playing from ahead and playing from behind. And this is going to depend a lot on champions, so there's going to be a lot of nuance to it, so it'll take a little bit of time for me to explain everything. But starting off with playing from behind. So when you're playing from behind on a champion like Ziggs, like Syndra, Orianna with good wave clear, who scale really effectively, you're going to want to play it very similar to how I play in this current game that we're seeing here. You're simply sitting back, making sure you clear the waves, stalling out the game, and playing around your item power spikes like Death Cap and Crown and these other 3-4 item power spikes that are very effective to you. Additionally, you want to make sure the waves are pushed out so that if your team dies one time, you don't necessarily just lose off that death. Again, you see here, I'm kind of pushing the mid wave out, making sure that it's pushed pretty deeply, even though they just got the Elder Dragon, so that when the enemy respawns, they're not able to pressure us as effectively. Now, on the other side of things, when you are behind, but you're on a champion who does not scale super effectively, who is more of a lane bully, an early game champion, or an assassin, or these types of champions, you're going to want to make sure that you get the side lanes pushed out very effectively, and that you're taking riskier plays. So when you don't scale super well, you're going to want to take a risky play to try to one-shot the enemy carry, because that's going to be the turning point of the game potentially. So to reiterate, when you're playing from behind, playing pretty safe and passive and just focusing on wave clear on these scaling mages, but playing more aggressively on the side lanes, making sure you keep your lanes pushed out even despite that. And then when you're on these champions who don't scale as well, taking those risky plays to potentially kill someone because you're already behind, so you might as well take a bit of a risk, making sure you keep those side lanes pushed out as well so that the enemy can't end off of one simple play. Now, on the other hand, when you're ahead, you don't want to focus too much on just permanently sitting mid lane and always fighting. Because you want to have this lane pushed so that if you get that one same kill, your team is then able to end the game straight off of those kills. You're going to make sure that you have the lanes pushed before the objective so that you can get the first move on the objective. You're going to make sure that you're not making overly risky plays to go in. You're just going to play more safe, more passive, let your team kind of make the plays for you and then go in, or make sure that you wait till your team is ready to follow up on your engages, these types of things. So essentially, taking really risky flips and really like over aggressive plays is going to be good from behind as a general statement, unless you're on these scaling mages. And on the other hand, you're going to want to play, a lot more safe and less aggressive when you are ahead in the game. All right, guys, that's going to do it for the video. So obviously I could have spoke about more things. There's always more things to talk about. However, these guide videos that I made one on jungle already, and now I have this one on mid lane, and I do plan on making them for the rest of the roles. I really want them to be relatively concise so that you guys really understand the key points of the role that truly allowed me to become a rank 5 autofill player, playing every role in the game at quite a high level. I don't want to overload information where I'm just talking about, 1,000 different things, because I have many specific videos on the channel that speak about a lot of small concepts that you can use to improve your game, as well as a ton of coaching videos, as well as I offer coaching for any of you guys for just $15 an hour. Link in the description of that. So I feel like a lot of the small details we could really hone in on in those other videos, and then this kind of a guide or any role guide is going to be more of a general thing, explaining to you guys the most important concepts of each role. So I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope that you're looking forward to future role guides. I plan on also making a video tomorrow probably about the general meta, explaining to you guys what the meta is and how you can abuse the meta in order to climb quite effectively. As always, the goal is to help you guys climb as quickly and effectively as possible and to learn a lot about the game. So I hope you guys enjoyed once again, and I'll see you guys in the next video.